สมาชิกคณะปันสงเคราะห์เชียนปรัชญาไม่เพียงสามัคคีกลมนันเนียสังคมของเรากาเปียกัมพูชีไม่ตรงกับเนียเพียมเพียสันเสรีให้กรีนโบราณเพียมอาธรรมปไตยไม่ประสิทธิ์โดประดันไทยรักษามันอ่อยบ่ตึงเชียนเปลี่ยนหมกตรวจตราสมบัติโดนตาทนเทียนจิตขมาย
Welcome and thank you for joining our show this evening. This is Khmer Youth Voices for Justice. This is part of the CNRP America live show. My name is Linda Wu. Today is Tuesday, April 20, 2021. First, I would like to wish everybody a happy Khmer New Year. May you be blessed with nothing but great health. Since we are in a pandemic, we cannot ask for more besides great health. So, before we also start, please help to support our petitions ending impunity for justice in Cambodia. Our campaign to end impunity for justice in Cambodia have gathered over 74,000 signatures as of this evening. Your support is very important. Please join me. Together we fight to end impunity. Together we hold Hun Sen responsible for continuing to kill and hurt Cambodians. Until now, hundreds of victims have never received any justice. So together we fight to end impunity for justice in Cambodia. Basically, justice for victims of state-backed killing in Cambodia. I have a short video clip on ending impunity for justice in Cambodia by Her Excellency Musakur.
តើយុត្តិធម៌ឬនីតិរដ្ឋភាព
Between 1975 and 1979, the green rice fields of Cambodia became the killing fields of Cambodia. Over 2 million lives were lost, including the lives of my own parents and many of my relatives. The Khmer Rouge wanted a society that is equal according to them. We still live and we are haunted with the legacy of the Khmer Rouge, which is the culture of impunity that continues to exist in Cambodia today. It is for this reason that we have started a campaign, worldwide campaign, a campaign to end impunity in Cambodia by seeking justice for cases, for the executions, for the killings that are organized, that are backed by the state. Among those cases of state-backed killings are the killings of CIVICUS, a very famous trade union leader, Bisep Pilaka, a ballet dancer, of Khmer, an independent analyst, of Chutvuti, a well-known environmentalist, of Venerable Sun Bun Thuen, who was advocating for the monks to have the right to vote, including workers who demanded fair wages. The campaign will also advocate for governments that are members of the United Nations to put pressure on the government of Cambodia to conduct independent investigations by using universal tools such as the UN Protocol for Independent Investigation. The campaign will also advocate for governments that believe and want to protect universal human rights to impose sanctions on the leaders of the government of Cambodia who are implicated in these state-backed extrajudicial killings. We ask you to be with us, to support us, to be part of a campaign to end the culture of impunity in Cambodia and to find justice for those who have been waiting for justice for their loved ones killed by the state. There cannot be real peace unless there is justice. There cannot be justice unless there is independent investigation. And then to take those cases to an independent justice system. Join us by signing on this petition. Thank you.
យើងរួមគ្នាបញ្ចប់នីតិរដ្ឋភាពដើម្បីយុត្តិធម៌នៅកម្ពុជា
Thank you and welcome back. Please help to support our petitions ending impunity for justice in Cambodia. As I stated earlier, our petitions have over 74,000 signatures, a little bit over 74,000 signatures. We are looking for 500,000 signatures, but please help to share, please help to support our petition, share with friends, share with family. That's a start. So please help to share and support our petitions. Thank you and welcome back. I have actually our topic for today is genocide, Cambodian genocide, talking about April 17, 1979, but we will be our discussion would be before April 17, 1979. We will split our discussion into 3 areas. First, we'll talk about from 1941 to 1975, and we will also talk about from 1975 to 1979, what we know as Khmer Rule period. Also, we will talk about from 1979 until now, what we are also call the second Khmer Rule or thank you peacetime regime right now. So our guests will hit on all those 3 time period. On the most important thing, we would talk about why the Khmer Rule start in the first place. So I really looking forward to this discussion. It's a really a good history, but at the same time, it's really a horrific. Meaning, almost 2 million people die in Cambodia. So it's going to be something that I will pay close attention to. And as young generations, I would like to know what's going on. So I have my 2 wonderful guests, and I also have Samady here. He's also going to come in and chime in on the questions that he may have. Samady and I were born. We are born after the genocide, but we will, we would like to know what happened and what's going on. So let me bring my first guest out. Chum Hiep Suor, Lok Rathatut, how are you?
Good, thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Let me introduce Mr. Rathatut. He is the Honorary President of CNRP in Massachusetts. So thank you for coming on to the show today. You are very important. You did a lot of research and you have a lot of information. Can you introduce yourself and introduce yourself to our audience and let us know how you're doing?
Okay, it's an opportunity to come and meet everybody. Yes, my name is Chann. My nickname is Ratha. Yeah, And well, I was born in Phnom Penh, and I grew up, during the Civil War. And I lived through the Khmer rules. I went through the refugee camp and all of that. And I came to United States on September 1st, 1988. From then on, I continue on my education, and I have been working as a medical practitioner for the last 21 years now in the U.S. And politically, I'm a member, I should say, senior member of SRP party many years ago, since 1997, and until now, I am the honorary president of the CNRP Massachusetts, and I believe in the cause of our fighting, standing up to liberate Cambodia. And I'm glad that we take this opportunity to talk a little bit about Cambodia, about the history, about the party, the CPP right now, where the original story of the CPP, where is he coming from, and who Hun San is, and like Heng Samrin and Jia Sim, who are they?
Yes.
So we should understand a little bit more about the history of Cambodia. Yeah, that
Yes,
will might be responsibility. And I just want to tell you that the story is long, huge, but my responsibility will take only a synopsis of the history to talk about it. Yeah.
Yes, and thank you for coming on to the show. In addition to the medical doctor, you spend many hours researching on this topic, and I appreciate that you take your time and join us today.
Thank you.
Thank you. My second guest, his name is Samady. He been here. Let me put him on. Samady, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. And you?
I'm good. Can you introduce yourself? I know you hear every other week, but we want to hear from you.
Well, my name is Samady, and I am a college student, and I just like to keep up and learn new things every day regarding the politics in our country, Cambodia, and also anything that benefit our country. So I'm here to learn. Thank you.
Thank you, Samady, for being here today. We have one more guest. Her name is Miss Theary Seng. She's going to be joining us later. We have technical difficulty, but as soon as she's get back on, I will introduce her as well. So for now, we will have Samady and Lukbu to talk about our history. Samady and I will do asking questions. And like I said from beginning, I was not born in the Khmer regime, but I have a lot of questions, and I basically listen. I will listen. Also, I heard a lot about it from my grandmother, from my parents. So Samady and I, we heard about it. We know about it. Not that we know, not personally experienced, but we know about that from our parents. So let me put both guests back on. Let me start by asking Lukbu, why is it important that the next generation know about the history of Cambodia, basically this horrific history of Cambodia?
Well, we have to understand that what happened in Cambodia is not just happened by chance. It is something making behind the scene that lead to the victory of the Khmer Rouge on April 17, 1975. And this is the beginning of nightmare of the year zero that lead Cambodia until the present day. And as all of us, we have to admit the reality is that Cambodia right now is under control of Vietnam. And we should not be surprised, if you live in Cambodia in 1979, right after the liberation, basically in every department, there's always Vietnamese advisor who will control what you say, what you write, and even what you think. So it is important, this is not happened by chance. It had been planned years ago when Ho Chi Minh created ICP, Indochina Communist Party in Hong Kong on February 3rd, 1930. We should not be surprised what happened now.
So basically, the first Khmer Rouge regime. It doesn't happen on purpose. It's our history from beginning until now. Let me ask Samady, why is it important that you should know about this? Samady, why is it important that you want to know about the history?
Well, the reason is as a younger generation like myself in the 20s, I believe is really hard nowadays to learn a genuine history of Cambodia about Khmer Rouge, because as you know, if you go to school in Cambodia, the regime is changing history. All I know is thank you Vietnam for peace, thank you for helping Cambodia break away from the Khmer Rouge. That is all I learned. So it's really difficult to know the true history of our country, unbiased. Thank you.
Thank you, Samady. Um, let I have that means Theary. She's back on. Let me introduce her. And she is out again. As soon as she's back on, we'll introduce her. Let me have Lopu start by the history. When we talking about Khmer Rouge, most people think of April 17, the start of basic. Exactly April 17, 1979. But the history of Khmer Rouge start before that. Let's talk about from the year 1941 until 1975. Can you help to summarize that actually beginning? I mean the pre Khmer Rouge.
Okay, so we have to start it by understand a little bit of Cambodian history. As you know that in August 11, 1863, when the French colony came to Cambodia. Now, if you look back to the Cambodian history during that time, we were in a serious danger of being controlled and taken over by Annam during that time with Vietnam and Siam Thai. You know, in 1863, when the French colony came, unintentionally, actually they saved Cambodia from completely disappear like Champa. Okay, this is one thing that we have to understand. And then there are many events that happen, but let me mention four people that will be an important people we should talk about and understand who they are. Okay, first of all, we should understand. I'm sure you know about Dr. Seng Tan. Seng Tan is a Khmer Krom. He was born in Khmer Krom. Seng Tan is the first Cambodian editor of Naga newspaper. You know, Naga mean Niak Kriek. Okay, and he's the first Cambodian prime minister, and he's one of the founder of Khmer Serai movement in early 1955. We will talk more about him later on, who he is and what he has done for Cambodia. Second person that we should understand too is Ho Chi Minh. Ho Chi Minh is an important person in Vietnam. He's the one that found ICP, Indochina Communist Party in Hong Kong on February 3rd, 1930. And one thing we have to remember, he according to his doctrine, he used one word that for me it's fascinating. If you read the whole thing, the doctrine he said that to make Indochina completely independent from France, but actually under Vietnam, basically, yes. If you look further into the history, you see the Communist Party in Indochina, there are three under control of Vietnam, all of them. And, you have Vietnam, and that is known as, they call the name, let me give you a quick one, they call Vietnam Worker Party. In Cambodia, they call KPRP or Cambodian People Revolutionary Party, and in Laos, they call Lao Isla. This is the doctrine of communists in Cambodia. The whole idea is to create communists in three countries under the control of Vietnam. That is why I'm saying that what happened in 1975 is not an accident. It is something that had been planned years ago, and that we have to understand. We always think about 1970 or the Khmer Rouge, but we have to understand who started the Khmer Rouge, where the origin of the Khmer Rouge, what is the benefit of Vietnam by supporting the Khmer Rouge. Okay, and this, this is, we have to understand when you look into a larger scale, you come to understand that the problem in Cambodia is the ideological wars between a communist and a capitalist. That happened. And unfortunately, we were like a small little ant that had been trampled on. So the third person that I should mention also, because these two persons also known as the father of Cambodian Communist Party, is Ajamian and Ajasok. Ajamian changed his name to Seng Minh. Seng because he take the name of Dr. Seng Thai. And Minh, he take Ho Chi Minh name, so Seng Minh. And a lot of people confuse between Seng Thai and Seng Minh. Remember that Seng Thai is the national hero, if a patriot, and is the first Cambodian prime minister. A champion who was born in Cambodia, Krom in Thailand actually. He take the name that very similar to Seng Thai in order to confuse people. But he's one of the founder of the Cambodian Communist Party. Even nowadays, in Cambodia, they always celebrate it. We can talk more about him later on too. And another person that we should understand too is Ajasok. Ajasok also changed his name to Tu Samut. And as you know, that Tu Samut is the one that was assassinated, and Pol Pot took over the power and became General Secretary of the KWRP later on. And we talk more about that. One thing, we have to understand the movement of Khmer Isra. Why do I say Khmer Isra movement is so important? Because a lot of people talk to me and I said to them, okay, do you know where the Khmer Rouge come from? Many people will say, come from communist country. Actually, it's not. The origin of the Khmer Rouge came from Khmer Isra. And people say, who is Khmer Isra? You know what happened? Now, Khmer Isra is the movement that was established in Thailand. The person that helped to create it is his name is Pok Kun. He is the uncle of Prince Manured's wife, and also the Thai Prime Minister, Mr. Bonamayong Pretty. Now, the whole idea of having Khmer Isra is that in 1944, this force they used to fight the French in Cambodia, okay, French colony in Cambodia.
Yes.
That is why they have the Khmer Isra to fight against it. Okay, what happened is that in 1946, actually, I checked the date. It was it was 1946, when the Thai relinquished land that they took from Cambodia in 1941. Let me go back a little bit. When you look into the past history, what happened is that when French colony came to occupy Cambodia, King Chulalongkorn took over some part of Cambodia and Laos. Okay. In the 1800s, the French kicked and defeated the king, Thai King Chulalongkorn, and say that you have to leave Cambodia. Okay. So for a lot of people, part of Cambodia, like Battambang, Siem Reap, belong to Thailand. Okay. In 1941, while the Japanese were occupying Cambodia, and the Japanese empire controlled the French colony. Now, a new Thai prime minister attacked the Japanese, and the Japanese get sick and tired. And so finally, there's a peace agreement we call Tokyo Peace Accord that was established in June 1941. Japanese empire forced the French to give up Cambodian territory, the left of Mekong River to Thai. Now those parts belonged to Thailand at that time. And the Khmer Rouge was established in 1944 to fight, the French colony. What happened is that in 1946, Thailand wanted to join the UN, okay? And it is a demand from the United States, Britain, and France that Thailand must return the Cambodian soil or territory back to Cambodia. On October 18, 1946, Thailand agreed to give Cambodian territory back to Cambodia. Now, what happened is that the Khmer Israel, who were fighting against the France, have no place to stay. So they are breaking up. They are the beginning of the communists. Okay, they break into three groups: the left, the right, and the middle. The left one, later on, they joined with the communist movement with Ho Chi Minh, who were fighting the front in Dien Bien Phu at that time. And the right, later on in 1970, they came back and they joined with Lon Nol. Okay, we call Khmer Saray, or they call Khmer Sol, and it was the leader was Seng. And the middle one, Dap Chuan, went to the Gulen Mountain. He became one of the Lord at that time. Now, when we look back to the history, in 1950, actually, let me tell you exactly what is that according to my book. On April 17 to 1950, in Kampong Saum, Le Kampot province, there was a meeting. That is the first meeting to create Cambodian communists. It is called as United Israel Front, UIF. Now, when you look back into who was there, actually, we have Seng Ming, who is the president, Chann, vice president, Tu Samut. Also, I mentioned earlier, Minister of Interior, Kai Mani. We have Chann, we have Sư Heng, we have Le Kai Mani, and we have Sokman, on and on. This group become the original of Cambodian Communist Party. That is why they always take, celebrate that, the day as the birth of Cambodian Communist Party, and they call Sungok Ming, and then they call Tu Samut as the founder, the father of Cambodian Communist Party. What happened is that, I'm sure all of us, we heard before too, they call Khmer Viet Minh. A lot of people say that Khmer Viet Minh, where does it from? Remember when I mentioned that when Thailand agreed to return territory back to Cambodia, the left side, left Khmer Israel, who had tendency toward Communist Party, contact with Viet Minh, Ho Chi Minh actually, for ammunition, for weapon, for support, and all of that. And Senu called them as Khmer Viet Minh. That become the name. Okay, and later on, he called them as Khmer Rouge. So, we call Khmer Rouge and all of that. When we look back into the history, you see United Israel Front had transformed many shapes. Okay, in 1950, it was United Israel Front. And then in 1951, it changed name to KPRP, or Cambodian Revolutionary Party, People Revolutionary Party. And in 1960, it changed name to KWP, Khmer Workers' Party. 1966, it changed to KCP, Cambodian Communist Party, or Khmer Rouge. And in 1990, it changed name to CPP. So when you look through the history, you have to understand that the CPP does not happen by chance. Somebody playing behind the scene. They use Cambodian to fight against each other for the ideology to control Cambodia. April 17, 1975 does not happen by chance. But remember that who support them? Okay, Vietnam, China, and Russia, or Soviet Union at that time. Okay, and this is the beginning of Cambodian nightmare. And a lot of us we have to understand where the CC is coming from. Even at the present day, when you look back into the Cambodian leaders in Cambodia, who are they? Hun Sen, he the military commander of Eastern Zone. He fled to Vietnam in 1977. Chia Sim, also he is here a very important person that worked closely with the Eastern leader. And also you have Heng Samrin also. All fled to Vietnam, okay, during the purge. After Nguyen Sao Pham was committed, was accused as as a traitor, and he committed suicide. Okay, so they went to Vietnam. When you look back to the history, also one event happened in Cambodia. Yet that we should understand. This involved with a group of Cambodian. One was one of them. Okay, they were the communists trained, brainwashed when they were young. When Cambodian won independent from French colony, most of them returned back to Vietnam, but some of them stay in Cambodia to begin warfare. And then, this movement that came back from Cambodia, a lot of them are from Khmer is the left side that come and to help Vietnam to control Cambodia. One was one of them. And we know that, he is one of the leader that helped to fight against the Khmerus in 1979. Hun Sen was the later on, Heng Samrin was the first one, and Chia Sim. When we look back to the past, what happened in Cambodia? Something has planned on it. Something make think that it is possible for the communists to control Cambodia. The only way that they can control Southeast Asia, the only way that can create Indochina is to control Cambodia and eventually go to Thailand. Because they already control Vietnam, they control Thai, Laos, and Cambodia. So another country that they have to control is Thailand. And then they occupy the entire Indochina. So, if anybody has any doubt, look back to the history and then you understand that we fall into a trap of a very cunning Ho Chi Minh. We have to learn. And, if we hate communists, if we hate a group of people that destroy their own people, I don't see a reason why we have to support this government in Cambodia. So I will give you some opportunity to ask more questions. And I say that again, the history is huge. And, I can also help you try to understand some chapter. One thing that I had to mention to you too, so you will understand, because you was not been born at that time and I wasn't born either. But this is very interesting about Cambodian history. Okay, now Seng of Thanh, when he was an editor of a Naga newspaper, he and Bach Chun and all of that, they have a movement, demonstration against the French colony, because they arrested Cha Ham Chiu and other leaders. So they fought against it. And what happened is that the French colony tried to destroy, to kill them. And Cha Ham Chiu eventually, he was killed at, in the prison. And Seng of Thanh escaped to Japan by the invitation of Emperor Hirohito. He was there until the World War II. When the World War II happened, he came back to Cambodia as a special person from Hirohito. and he and a group of Cambodian went to Sihanouk's palace and break down the door and forced Sihanouk at that time to sign and name him as the Cambodian Prime Minister. That is why Seng Thanh became the Cambodian Prime Minister, the first one, without any voting, but by using Japan and force Sihanouk to sign and made him Cambodian Prime Minister. Also, what happened is that in the end of World War II, Seng Thanh believed that, if Cambodia become an independent country, has its own government, and something like that, so they will not be able to do anything because it become a sovereign state, a sovereign country. Okay, so that's why he stayed there. He tried to do anything, whatever he can, try to establish government and everything. Guess what? Sihanouk got him arrested, and he's supposed, they put him, they sent him to France and sentenced for 20 years. But later on, surrendered, King Sihanouk's father asked Sihanouk to send him back to Cambodia to help Sihanouk during the time of some Khmer Niyom at that time. But instead of coming to help Sihanouk, he came to Cambodia and he went to the Maquis. I'm sure you might have you heard about what Maquis? Maquis means that a group of Cambodian intellect that went into the forest area, to create a movement, and later on known as Khmer. And they dissolved themselves after Lon Nol took over power in 1970. Okay, this is just a brief history, so we will know who's who. Yeah, and you have any question? Ask. The history is huge, and believe me, I read 60 textbook, so to summarize that in half an hour, it will not be sufficient. Yes.
Thank you, Lukpu. Yes, from what I read from 1970 to 1975, it's a lot of it's wars going on. So it's war keep going from never ending war, basically.
Yeah.
I seen that Theary is coming in and out. She has her internet connections issue. Let me bring somebody if he have any questions. Somebody, do you have any questions to look regarding the time, the period that he just talked about to introduce the introduction before the Khmer rule regime?
So, look, Pooh, you have a very interesting summary, and I don't have any question. I'm just like listening to you explaining them to another side of Khmer Rouge instead of just saying the Vietnamese is the one who helped free Cambodia and is our savior. So it's really interesting. Can't wait to for your book to come out.
Yeah, and let me continue a little bit then. If you don't have any more questions. So what happened is that in 1970, when Cambodia feel that King Norodom Sihanouk is leaning toward communists. Now, if you read his book, he make it very clear. Sihanouk believes strongly that the communists will win in Indochina. He strongly believed that. I read his book. That's why I'm saying that. So his idea is that, well, if I make friends with the communists, I'm sure when they took control of Indochina, they will preserve Cambodia as neutral country. That is why, he make friend with Chu Enlai, one of his best friend, okay, in China. And that's why, he make friend with Kim Il-sung of North Korea. That's why, His Majesty, the King at present day, he went to Yugoslavia where he learned, he also was a communist country. Most of His Majesty's kids studied in communist country. The whole idea is to get stronger relationship with the communist country, hoping to save Cambodia in the future. In 1970, when King Norodom Sihanouk went to Soviet Union and he was notified by Alexei Kosygin in Moscow that there was a coup in Cambodia. So instead of going back to Cambodia, Sihanouk flew to China. Now, it is very interesting, people do not know that when he flew to China, Chu Enlai already planned a meeting. He brought in Salatso or Pol Pot with Pham Van Dong, come from Vietnam, because this is an opportunity, to convince King Norodom Sihanouk to join the movement with the communist fighting against the American capitalists. And at that time, the Lonol regime, that's what they call. So you see, the history already made, already played behind, and Sihanouk just fall into the trap. When he came to China, he agreed to create we call Cambodian Royal Government or National Union, or GUNC in Beijing. And what, they involved with Salat Saw and Pham Van Dong. Already since the beginning, this is 1970. Okay, they form a communist party in Cambodia and they need more support. That is why they invite King Norodom Sihanouk. And who's behind that too? China. Okay.
Thank you, Phu. Let me introduce our guest. Our guest. She's been in and out. Let me add her in. Theary, how are you?
I'm so sorry for the for the poor internet connection. I'm well, thank you, Linda. Hello, everyone. Hello, Dr. Tu. Hello, Samady. Hello, Bong On Yang Teng Aknia, Pipping People Blog. Hello, everyone, to all the Cambodian patriots inside, outside Cambodia, friends of Cambodia. Hello from Kien Swai, from lockdown.
How are you doing, by the way?
I'm okay. I'm okay. My concern is for everyone else who are really in dire strait because of the lockdown. It's very draconian, immediate, without any notice, without any warning to prepare for supplies. I have a refrigerator, but I would say 99% of my neighbors do not have refrigeration. So when the lockdown happens, and when the lockdown is in Phnom Penh and it's in the Khmer, but all our markets, I'm outside of Phnom Penh, the Khmer, I'm in Kien Swai, but all the markets are closed, and Cambodians go to the market every day to buy food, to buy meat and vegetables, and now they're, it's just mismanagement at the highest degree from this regime. And this is why we do need to change the regime through democratic means. And we need to continue to struggle so that lives can be improved and can live in a free, in a more prosperous manner. We can go on that, but that's not the topic for today. I'm so sorry.
No, it's perfect. We want to know what's going on, because I read last night there's a red zone going on and you're not supposed to, move or something. So we want to know how you're doing. So thank you for sharing on that. And, we all, like our audience and I, want to know how you're doing. Also, our topic is Cambodian genocide, April 17, 1979. And I have stated that it does not just happen on April 17, 1979. It's way before that. And Look, Phu already explained it from the beginning of start from probably 1941 until 1975. So before we start, I would like you to explain, basically tell our new generation, why is it important that we as a youth or as a younger generations need to know about this history?
We need to know because it's our history, as you said, with the emphasis on our. And if we don't know our past, we can't understand our present and we can't plan for the future, especially when our past is horrific. And we need to draw lessons from the evil which has been perpetrated and continues to have legacy. We're not free from our past. We're never free from our past. So the main reason we want to learn from our past is to draw lessons so that we don't make the same mistakes again. But I want to emphasize your point, Linda, that we focus on 75 to 79 as the genocide, but multiple genocides occurred in Cambodia. And I'm so glad for this English version for the Cambodian audience who are versed in English inside Cambodia or in the diaspora, because regrettably, the important, trustworthy resources are in English. And for me, my studies is in international politics, international relations, and prior even to studying international politics with a particular focus on Southeast Asian history and with an even more specific focus on the on genocides generally, and of course the Cambodian genocide. Like Dr. Tuj, I read books because I love to read books on these topics. For pleasure, but also for my formal studies at Georgetown in the School of Foreign Service. So with that in mind, I heard bits and pieces by Dr. Tuj giving detailed information and names which are important to trigger our interest to research further on. But let me zoom out a little bit and give broad strokes of Cambodian history and give you important resources, because we need to trust our resources, and the more direct the resources, the better. Of course, I mean, when we take testimonies or hear things, we always weigh how trustworthy is it, who is giving us the resource, and do they have the expertise. So I want to give general, broad strokes about the history of Cambodia, and then focusing on 75 to 79 as requested by you, Linda. But I won't go into the details because the details in this time period may be a little bit more confusing, and they're already been told by Dr. Tuj, which are important and enough to trigger an interest for you, the audience, to pursue. Remember that the Khmer Rouge era, as Dr. Tuj mentioned, did not occur out of thin air. It did not occur in a vacuum where there's no air. It had a past, it had its foundation, it had its resources, and history is a stream. It's not when we write history, think in terms of April 17, 1975, it ends on January 7, 1979. But lives flow and weaves, one second flow into the other. So that's really important, the way that we live lives and the way that we read certain periods to help us understand and compartmentalize our thinking and helping us to think in terms of chunks. The Khmer Rouge years occurred during the Cold War. And what is the Cold War? The Cold War was basically a war that spanned decades between free countries led by the United States and communist countries, or the communist bloc. And the free countries led by the United States, we're talking about Europe, Australia, New Zealand, that's clumped in terms of the free countries. Or now what we would say the democratic countries and the communist bloc. And within the communist bloc, there were also two major warring sections, and that's the Soviet Communist, the USSR, now Russia, before it broke apart, and China. And they were at war with each other. And these two communist blocs versus the free countries, they were at war with each other, and they had their satellite states. Russia had Vietnam as its satellite, as its pawn, Chikon Ok. China had Cambodia as its satellite state, as its pawn, as its Kon Ok. And during the Cold War, the political theater of the Cold War, one of the primary political theater that, when we think of the Cold War, occurred in Southeast Asia, mainland Southeast Asia, and symbolized by the Vietnam-United States, the war between the United States and Vietnam. From the American perspective, the Vietnam War. From the Vietnamese perspective, the American War. And of course, Cambodia shares a border with Vietnam. And the Vietnamese and the war between Vietnam and the United States occurred in the 60s and early 1970s. Because Cambodia shared a border with the United States, the Vietnamese soldiers, the communists, and during that time, Vietnam were two countries. North Vietnam was the communist part, and South Vietnam was another country. It was the democratic part. So there was, during the Cold War, there was a fear among the free countries led by the United States of the domino effects, that if one country falls to communist, all the other countries will fall one by one by one. So in this political theater that is mainland Southeast Asia, the war between Vietnam and the United States was to make sure that South Vietnam did not fall to the communists led by North Vietnam. So there was a civil war. The soldiers took refuge, the Vietnamese soldiers took refuge in Cambodia, breaking into the sovereignty of Cambodia. And that pulled in and that drew the firepower of the United States. The United States started to bomb Cambodia. It bombed Vietnam, but then it also started to bomb neutral Cambodia. Cambodia that was not at war with the United States, but because the Vietnamese soldiers were taking refuge in Cambodia, it bombed Cambodia. The actions of the United States violated international law, and it violated the laws of the United States. But anyway, so that created what we know as the Khmer Rouge. The Khmer Rouge is the French word coined by Sihanouk. It means red Khmer, red to connote communism. So this is the Khmer communists. And prior to that, of course, as Dr. Tu mentioned, the Khmer Rouge communists really was a sibling to the Vietnamese communists, who was the older brother, because it was led by Ho Chi Minh, who had an international standing, and he was connected with the Soviet communists. He was less so with the Chinese communists, but there was a huge network of communist states led by the Soviet and China. And Ho Chi Minh also played a very, very important role. And so when the students from Cambodia, Vietnam went to study in France, normally because these were colonies of France, there were always a section of students who were pulled in by communism. And it was very fashionable to be pulled in by the ideology of communism during that time era. So the Khmer Rouge occurred, one, as part of the larger communist chain led by the two big brothers, Soviet China, and then Ho Chi Minh, the bigger brother for Cambodia. And the Cambodian communists had its training in Vietnam, because, as you know, we were the weaker state between Vietnam and Cambodia, especially before the imperialist France. France always favored the Vietnamese over Cambodia and had Vietnamese managers and bosses living and conducting affairs in Cambodia prior to during colonialism, and even afterward. That history continued to be in Cambodia. So that's the broad sweep of the political context of the Khmer Rouge. The immediate enemy are the U.S., who bombed, and at that moment in time, Vietnam was not yet an open enemy, because it was training from the Vietnamese communists, and it had to balance all the different interests of that time. But when the US bombed Cambodia, that was the triggering point that allowed the Khmer Rouge leaders bring villagers to see all the bombs, and that created an emotional uprising, and that's why the power of the Khmer Rouge communists, the Khmer Krahom, went from a ragtag band of a few individuals and scattered networks into a very powerful movement because of that immediate reaction to US bombings, the saturated period in 1973. But there are other, and there, as I already touched upon by Dr. Tut, there are many other factors: French colonialism, the strands and the influence of communism, the different actors in Cambodia, because Cambodia then as now was very porous. The borders was very porous. We didn't have the strength to really be an independent state after our independence from France, because we had a really poor educational system. And the educational system, I mean, thanks to Sihanouk, we may criticize King Sihanouk for many, many things, and I join in that criticism. But to his credit, during his time period, he really focused on education, and that created the intellectual class. Still very fledgling, but there was a growing for the first time a university within Cambodia. The people didn't have to travel to Vietnam or France to study at high school or college. There was Sisawat High School, for example. So in the 60s, 70s, we did see at the beginning, it was still very fragile, but of an educational system, there's all these intellectuals. But when we use the word intellectuals, again, we have to put it a little bit in quotes within the Cambodian context. But if we compare it with French intellectuals, I mean, their PhD is a different type of PhD than the way that the Cambodia had. And even today, we know that the PhD here in Cambodia, the quality is of a different nature because we don't trust the source and the process and the rigor of education. But before my time is up, it's really important, especially now that this conversation is in English, that I show you and I introduce to you, if you haven't already seen and read these books, the books that are essential, not only as an educator, if you want to be, not only as a student of Cambodia, but general reading. These books are essential, and I'm going to list them in priorities. I mean, I have hundreds of books like Dr. Tut, because of my interest, and two, because of my studies. But I don't want to show them to confuse you. I'm just going to show you the top maybe 10, and in this order. So for general understanding of Cambodia, it doesn't matter if you're a student or just a general reader. These are the essential books that you need to read. And I'm going to use really strong words because I really believe them. I have read all of them and I'm giving value to them. I know that this is giving value, and these are the books that are important, really important. The first book, that card, absolutely, that you need to read about Cambodia, that is trustworthy and it reads like a novel, is When the War Was Over by Elizabeth Becker. I'm telling you these things because, as I said, there are many books on Cambodia. And many, unfortunately, again, they're written by non-Cambodians because there is a way of that rigor that we can trust. And as Dr. Tut can attest, I mean, we get our sources from them because they have done extremely rigorous research. And these and everything is footnoted. They have access to the politicians, to historical documents, to the testimonies. So there are different books out there in Cambodia, and I'm going to give it value. There are books like this, which is number one. Why is it number one? Because, for example, if you want to read about a testimony about Cambodia, a survivor testimony, you may read a memoir. You may talk to your grandmother. You may talk to your grandfather. They have their own personal experience, which is very sharp and very focused, and that has its own value. But it's very narrow because it's only the experience of one life in a very narrow and constricted time period where they could see not much else. So there's a value if you want to just hear the personal testimony, a survivor witness testimony, then you read memoirs. And as you may have shown, Linda, I have written a memoir. This time, in this time period right now, I would not recommend my book. If you want to read about my life, fine. But if you want to generally understand the history of Cambodia, the policies, the actors, the intricacies of that time period at a more general level, with all the details of all the names that Dr. Du mentioned and their thinking, and these are individuals who have the expertise and have woven these testimonies that they have incorporated with their own research, with policies, with historical documents, which were confidential at one point, but they, through the Freedom of Information Act, they have asked to view them. They have covered Cambodia over the years. For example, Elizabeth Becker was here covering Cambodia as a journalist for the Washington Post in the 1970s prior to the Khmer Rouge. And her background is Indian studies and Southeast Asian studies. So there's already a rich background, and when all the details come, she can weave it together. And plus, she has access to government documents and officials, and also testimonies like myself and people in government. This is number one book for every Cambodian who can read in English, and for every friend of Cambodia who wants to know about Cambodia. It has everything in it. And it covers the Paris Peace Agreements, the policies and the politics behind that. Why did all of these superpowers, the United States, Japan, France, Germany, Australia, come together to create this massive conference called the Paris Peace Agreements for this tiny, insignificant country called Cambodia? Well, she tells about the politics behind that. This is absolutely a must read. When the war was over, you can order this through Amazon. Inside Cambodia, outside Cambodia, you can get it at any bookstore. This is very easy to find. Number one, top, essential. It's also in Khmer, but I don't know how trustworthy because I haven't finished reading the Khmer translation. So I'm just going to give the English right now.
Let me interrupt you. Okay. Make sure it's when the war's over about Cambodia, and also make sure it's by Elizabeth Becker, because when you Google when the war is over, it's so many titles. So make sure it's the one on Cambodia.
Oh, thank you for that. I didn't know that. Yeah, so it's Elizabeth Becker.
Yes.
When the war was over. This is a woman who loves Cambodia, who loves Cambodians, who has deep knowledge. She's an American journalist, an American author, and she has just written over a wide span of topic, but her love has always been Cambodia. Plus, she has met Pol Pot. Pol Pot. Pol Pot invited three journalists to Cambodia in 1978, and he killed one of them before her eyes. So this is riveting. The writing is excellent. It reads like a novel, meaning that it's really easy to read. It's for a general readership, not just for students of politics or for academics. This is a general readership. The second book, which is a little bit more focused, but still really important for Cambodians and friends of Cambodia, and it's the number 2 on my list, is Pol Pot, The Biography by Philip Short. David Chandler has written a book the biography of Pol Pot. That is also very good. But David Chandler is better known and better is a better source for the history, long history of Cambodia from the beginning to the 1970s. This is the number 2 book that you should read on Cambodia. It's different from Elizabeth Becker's book. It's by Philip Short. Philip Short is also the biographer of Mao Zedong, who is the main leader of the communism of China. And so this gives a very different perspective, and it is, again, well researched, and you find a lot of details in here that you did not know before and you can't really find in other books. This is definitely number 2. Philip Short, The Biography of Pol Pot, Anatomy of a Nightmare is the subtitle. Number 3, and that's very easy to find. This you can find easily through Amazon. You can order in Amazon. In Cambodia, you can order in Amazon. There's a bookstore called Monuments Bookstore, which is also a very good bookstore in Cambodia. But on the more sensitive titles, I'm not sure if they're carrying books like these. The number 3 must read, but this is unfortunately a very difficult book to find. And if you, because it's no longer in print, and if you find them, they're really expensive. And unfortunately, I have my own copy. It's a book that was first written in French by the anthropologist Marie Alexandrine Martin. But this translation reads like it's the original. It's so well translated that when you read it, you don't even think that it's a translation because it's just so well translated by Professor Mark McCloy. This is definitely another book that is different from Elizabeth Becker, from Philip Short, When the War Was Pol Pot. This book, of course, again, it covers the history of Cambodia, especially the Khmer Rouge, prior to the Khmer Rouge, but the focus here and the value here is on the occupation period. She gives details about the years of Vietnamese military occupation of Cambodia. She talks about how the Vietnamese military used the educational system as a way of propaganda, as a way to destroy the culture of Cambodia. She talks about the K5 plan. She talks about the different policies that were really restrictive and were intentionally created to destroy the Cambodian people, which is pure genocide. To focus on killing the men, for example, which is the K5 plan. This is absolutely the 3rd book. If you can find it, you are a very, very lucky person. I have posted chapters or important sections in my Facebook that are free, so I will provide the links for that. Cambodia, A Shattered Society. The original title in French. Oh, here's the woman. Oh, you can't see. Oh, yes, you can a little bit. The original title in French is I don't have it offhand. But anyway, so this is the English version. There is the original title in French is a little bit different than this, but that is a 3rd book. And if you're, David Chandler. So if you just want a sort of like a very broad history of Cambodia, A History of Cambodia by David Chandler is the seminal book, and it has been well translated into Khmer by the Center for Khmer Studies. So A History of Cambodia by David Chandler. David Chandler is the premier historian, but now he's known for up to 1970s. After that, there are other authors, which I have mentioned that you should read. But this is a very an overview about the history of Cambodia with a particular focus on the Angkorian period, the different kings, and the evolution of Cambodian history from the very, very, very beginning. So a general history, and it's also in Khmer. And the Khmer translation I can recommend because it is very, very good. This is also, you can get this. This is easily available on Amazon. And also, I'm certain books, the monument bookstores inside Cambodia also carries these books because it's not that sensitive. If you have, this is a beautiful book. What I have been showing in the first 4 books, they're called non-fiction. They're true. They're history books. This is a novel, and it is so beautifully written by a friend. This focuses on the occupation period, and it takes the lives of a few soldiers and follows their struggles and their lives during the period of occupation from the Khmer Rouge era. As I've said, you know, when we study, of course, we need to do this. We say this era starts from April 17, and it ends on January 7, 1979. Well, lives flow from one second to the other. On 16 April 1975, moving into 17 April 1975, when you live and breathe, it's not the way that history is written. Well, this reminds us of that, of the human side of suffering, particularly during the very, very unknown period of the Vietnamese military occupation of Cambodia. And I should pause here. During the Khmer Rouge, and Linda, you had mentioned that the Khmer Rouge genocide is not the only genocide, and that is very, very important to emphasize. That we use the term genocide in 2 ways. There is a very legal, technical way which has to fulfill certain conditions. The first condition, there has to be an intentional killing of a particular group, and that group is based on class, religion, Butsa, race, ethnicity, and political opinions, for example. That is legal genocide. Is very, very particular, and they need, if we say that it's a genocide in a legal way, they need to fulfill those legal criteria. But we also speak about genocide more generally when we can't find words enough to express the horror of the mass atrocities. Then we just say, oh, genocide, which sort of like captures all the crimes, the magnitude, the scope, the horrors of the crime. And as you know, the word genocide was first coined by Mr. Lemkin in the 1940s for the Jewish Holocaust. Prior to the Jewish Holocaust, there was no such word as genocide as a legal term that could be prosecuted. So this man, a Jewish man, thought, we need to think of a term. So genocide is the combination of the killing of a particular group of individuals, of a race, based on, again, religion, class, political opinions. This is absolutely beautiful. I haven't done the research how valuable, how easy it is to assess, but I would highly recommend this. This is a novel, but it also gives you true history through novel telling. More generally, if you want to understand, I'm going to go very fast now. These books are important. I'm not going to give them a number, but the first 3 or 4 books, they earn that priority. I mean, if you only have 4 books that you can read the 4 books that I mentioned earlier. These books are also important after those 4 important books. Brother Enemy, The War After the War, A History of Indochina Since the Fall of Saigon. As you know, the Khmer Rouge occurred on a regional political theater that was the war between the United States and Vietnam, and on the larger international political theater that was the Cold War between the free countries and the two communist giants, the Soviet and China. Brother Enemy is written by Nayan Chanda, who is a trusted source. He is anything written by any of the authors I mentioned, you can trust, and they're solid. There are individuals out there who are authors and reporters on Cambodia. They're not trustworthy because their politics, they are either self-interested, or their politics are aligned with this Hun Sen regime or with a particular regime that is invidious to the interests of Cambodians and Cambodia. So anything by David Chandler you can trust, anything by Nayan Chanda, William Shawcross, in a bit I'm going to show you William Shawcross, Stephen Heder, Stephen Morris, Elizabeth Becker, Philip Short. These are names you can trust. And these are some of the books they've written. They've written many, many books, but these are the ones in Cambodia that are essentials. This speaks about the regional politics of the time, and it's by a veteran journalist, Nayan Chanda, who was here during the Khmer Rouge, during the fall of Saigon. As you know, there was the fear by the United States that of the domino effects, that if one country falls, if South Vietnam falls to the country North Vietnam, then there will be a domino effect where many other countries around the world will also fall to communism. This looks at the mainland Southeast Asian nations of that time, in particular, the relationships between Cambodia and Vietnam, and with the Soviet, China, and the United States, the main superpowers and actors during that time, determining the policies of these small countries, in particular, the most vulnerable being Vietnam and Laos. Laos is gone. Laos is even in a worse state than Cambodia in many ways in terms of its inclination toward communism. But this is a very, very good book by Nayan Chanda. Zooming out a little bit, if you want to know about the Cold War period, about the U.S. policies and the thinking of relationships of the Soviet Union and Chinese Communists, United States during those years, Nixon and Kissinger, Partners in Power by Robert Delick, who is a very celebrated U.S. historian, Robert Delick. This is the book. It's a broader it gives a broader political context to the sharp focus of the Khmer Rouge years, and then the less sharp focus of the regional politics of those decades, the 60s and 70s. Nixon was the president of the United States during the time in the 60s, 70s that was responsible really toward the end of the Vietnam War, and Kissinger was his senior advisor and at one point Secretary of State of the United States, and who was the mastermind for the US bombings of Cambodia. Now, zooming back in again, why Vietnam invaded Cambodia focuses on, this is an academic book. This is, it's not thick, it's thin, but it's really well written, well researched, but it's an academic book at the level of maybe a senior in college. So you can read it as a high schooler, but this is an academic book. It's really well written. It's written by a friend of mine, Professor Stephen Morris. Oh, there's a, be careful of the Khmer translation. This regime, someone in this regime or someone associated with this regime translated the book into Khmer as Why Vietnam Liberated Cambodia. Stupid. focusing even sharper, but on a different time period, is Side Show by William Shawcross. Again, anything written by William Shawcross, anything written by Stephen Morris, you can trust. Yes, so there are different covers for this. Dr. Duke is showing another cover for Sideshow. William Shawcross is a British journalist, and he has written this book about the time period prior to the Khmer Rouge, U.S. policies. The title actually gives away the contents. Sideshow: Kissinger, Nixon, and the Destruction of Cambodia. So this talks about how Cambodia was a sideshow to the Vietnam-U.S. war during the Cold War years. Many other books, but I think that's good for now. But these are the top. So again, there are many resources out there. If you want to only know about the Khmer Rouge, the number one person, the number one expert on the Khmer Rouge is Professor Stephen Heder, H-E-D-E-R. He is the number one expert on the Khmer Rouge. He's fluent in Khmer. He reads Khmer fluently. He speaks Khmer fluently. He was working at the Khmer Rouge Tribunal. He is, again, a very trusted source, in particular on the Khmer Rouge, because he was at one point sympathetic with them, and then he interviews many of them, and then of course he saw and he has helped with the CIA in terms of information, and to this day he is just a solid person on the history of Cambodia with a very sharp focus on the Khmer Rouge individuals and era. And I'm going to mention, I'm hesitant to mention two names which we should avoid and be cautious in reading with a question mark. I don't want to do this but these two names are important enough that I need to mention them, because they have really poisoned the atmosphere for policies on Cambodia. The first is Ben Kiernan of Yale University. He has books on Cambodia, and Steve Heder, it's not my criticism. I'm passing on the criticism of experts who are poking holes into the writings of Ben Kiernan. Be cautious when you read Ben Kiernan. Be cautious when you read or talk to Helen Jarvis, who is the spokesperson for this Hun Sen regime to this day. So I'm just going to mention two of these names. There are a few other names so that you read, but when you read wide enough, you will know. But so I'm just going to give you a summary of the people and the individuals that that should be trusted, because and Dr. Dewey can testify, because when you read wide enough, you have a sense of the value of these sources. Prove me wrong by reading and then challenging me is how I would pose this. But these are the essential books that everyone, not just students of politics, should read on Cambodia. A few of them are very difficult to find, like Dr. Esmeralda's book, K5, The Bamboo Wall. That's no longer in print. Cambodia, A Shattered Society is no longer in print. But if you have a heart and a will to find it, we can somehow provide the resources. And this is also a reminder for individuals like us, Dr. Dude, who have these sources, that we should somehow make them available in a way that is reasonable. Thank you. Sorry I took so much time on that. But I'm so glad my internet worked during this time.
Thank you, Namin. Do you have any book that Namin Theary missed that you would like to recommend? Send me on the book already.
Well, you said it so well, and this is about geopolitics in Cambodia. I love those books that you talk about. And let me show you. This is Elizabeth Becker, the first edition. You have the second one. I have both editions. I read it. I read both of them. The first and second edition. I have both. Yeah. So, and my favorite also, Brother Enemy. Yes, I do have that too. Cambodian Shattered Society. Yes, I have that too. That's one of my favorite that I do a lot of reading for my books. William Shawcross. It's good, but if you want to know about refugee, here, Quality of Mercy. is another one too. And if you remember the document Cambodia Year Zero in 1979, it was done by William Sarkoff. Also, that's a video. And of course, Philip Short. And my favorite of all that I use all the time is Dr. Chandler. And actually, I contact him from a Monarch University because I was looking for some books that I couldn't find it. And actually, he even sent a book for me from Monarch University. So I'm glad, I found somebody who loves Cambodian history like me. I have a lot more. And whatever that Theary said is exactly. Helen Jarvis, Ben Kiernan, these two you have to watch out for. And also one more person you have to be very careful to when you read the book is Margaret Slocum. Also, she's another one who sent supporter also. And for me, in the course of writing this book, I do both. I read a book like Punishing the Poor, written by a communist sympathizer. But I just want to see both sides so I can do both. And I read both. Actually, I read a lot of books. Like Theary said, because I want to know, I want to understand the concept of what it was going on. And Theary said so well about geopolitics. And for me, kind of focus into a domestic politics in Cambodia, but Theary put it into a complete shape. And it's very, very interesting. Yes.
Let me continue. She was introducing the books that also talking about the 1975 to 1979, and she touched base a little bit on K5. That is happened between 1985 to 1989 for our younger generation who doesn't know who what is K5. If I say in Khmer, like Ka probably the older generation might know. I do remember when I was young that a lot of men, it's not women, it's men, been sent over truckload and truckload to the countryside. Can you help to explain? Since we're talking about a general term on genocide, can you help to explain what is K5 after Khmer rule?
Project K5 or Yuttanika Kopram. Actually, it was named, and according to one source that I was in one of my documents, this is a project that was engineered by Le Docteur. The whole idea, like remember Theary talked about Dr. Esmeralda Luciel. She talked about like the bamboo wall in Chiang Rai. So the whole idea of the project, it has one plan. Okay, during that time there was a guerrilla war. So what they intend to do, they want to create 800 kilometers of bamboo wall. So the whole idea, they send millions of Cambodia, to cut down the tree. And when they cut down those trees, they're going to build the wall and they leave a space where they put soldier and guard it, make almost into like a Great Wall of China. Okay. The problem is that probably 2 million people was sent there. And actually, I was one of them. In 1984, I was a medical student, my first year in medical school. I'm not supposed to go because they need educated people to stay. The problem I am because Circular 351. You know about that, right? In 1984, I was a medical student, my first year. Yeah. So what happened is that in 1982, Chiesut, Deputy General Secretary, has come up with a plan because at that time China attacked Vietnam. So what they do, they regroup. They say that, well, there's a lot of Chinese in Cambodia, and they might try to, to support China. So they create a small segregation they call Circular 351, Chinese Cambodian. And I was one of them. Now, as a Chinese Cambodian, you have no privilege in everything. Okay, you are the first one to die and all of that. That's what happened to me too. I'm supposed to be sent to that one of the field at Kirirom to cut down all the tree and hopefully to build the wall to guard Cambodia. At that time, when you read back into the history, you find out a lot of young people, especially male, around 18, 19, 20, 24, 25, all of them, escaped to the West to avoid being drafted into the K5 plan. Thierry can tell you a lot more, with Dr. Esmeralda. Basically, at least 20,000 people were killed. Okay. And there are more than that, I'm pretty sure, because when they cut down the tree fell down, and people just all over the place, landmines, diseases and all of that. So it's really one of the second, a massacre of Cambodian indirectly though. And what happened is that when Cambodian who sacrificed their life to cut down all those trees, where do they take those trees to? Of course, Vietnam. Okay. And that that is the project K5 plan. So you had twofold. One fold, the intention is to protect Cambodia from guerrilla war. The second one is like the way how they kill people. And then they can be prospered by taking those, tree lumber to Vietnam and sell abroad. And that is project K5.
Yes, from what I understand, also is a lot of men got sick from malaria,
Yeah.
and lots of them because it's in the forest. Let
Yeah.
me add. That mean Terry's back to the conversation. I mean, we are talking about K5. I'm trying to how Luk Bu explain what is K5 for our younger audience who doesn't know. I told him I remember when I was young, like truckload of men was loaded to go to the forest. And Ming is froze again. So let me see. Her internet connection got yeah. So thank you, Luk Bu, for explaining that. Now let move on. Let's move on to the what we call Khmer Rouge regime, the second one right now. How do you describe that? That's all. How do you describe?
Now the situation in Cambodia is even worse than we expected. The Khmer Rouge had destroyed so many lives. They destroyed the complete society. Okay, Hun Sen government destroyed even more, actually, by opening Cambodia, to the foreigner to come to live freely. That's one thing. Privatization of the Cambodian property for his family, for his close associate. They destroy everything. They destroy land, they destroy river. They sold everything, and they used power to destroy Cambodia. The saddest part about the whole situation in Cambodia right now, they don't just kill a family, they kill a country, they kill a society, and they destroy livelihood. In 1979, after I came back from the Khmer Rouge, you can go fishing, you can go to the river, you can go, there are plenty of fish everywhere. Everything is now sold off into private owners. Okay. And Cambodians, the poor Cambodian eventually has no place to go, has no land to plant their crop, has no water to harvest fish. They cannot get into the forest to cut down tree because everything is now belong to certain individual that has a strong connection with the government, with Hun Sen. It is time for Cambodia to stand up and wake up. Cambodia, only a group of Cambodians are filthy rich, where majority of Cambodians are live in poverty. Okay, and right now when you see, just look back right now to COVID-19. Okay, who embrace it? Who openly welcome COVID-19 to Cambodia? Hun Sen. Okay, and like Terry said, when you use the word draconian, very interesting term. A lot of lawyers normally we don't use this common term. But like, you use it because you feel like you can do it. You don't need to notify anybody. Just use it. As you know that, in any country, in Canada, in Australia, and in US, before we start doing something, we let people know so they can plan. By doing this, they are killing people. They are destroying people. So, this is the second killing fields that probably you don't see massive of people, like few thousand were executed at the same time, but you see an entire country, entire nation is being destroyed by this government. It's time to wake up. I don't know what else to say. It's time to wake up.
Thank you,
No, Terry can
Lupu.
tell you a lot more than they do. Terry is there.
Yeah, I'm gonna let Ming Terry speak. Every time she speaks, her internet is on, so I guess that's her power to keep on the internet. We touch base on K5. Lupu explained a little bit, and now we move on to the current regime, with what most people call the Khmer Rouge, the second Khmer Rouge. Would you like to elaborate on that, because it's when we're talking about genocide, we keep continue on to right now. Can you help to elaborate on that? I mean.
I would love to. The current regime is Khmer Rouge Part 2, Khmer Rouge Redux, because the actors are the same. The regional actors are the same, Vietnam, China. The international interests are the same, the US inside Cambodia to counterbalance China, communism. The domestic actors are the same because Hun Sen was former Khmer Rouge, and many of the senior officials within this regime were former Khmer Rouge. So the actors and players are the same ones as of Khmer Rouge Part 1. So it's not an exaggeration to say that we are living through Khmer Rouge Part 2 in the destruction of Cambodia. And the foreign interests are the same. The militarization of Cambodia. We have China building a military base, a massive military base in Cambodia, using using Cambodia to further its larger politics. And Hun Sen is a very willing actor in allowing foreign interests use him to destroy his own country and his own people. So, I'm charged with treason. It should be individuals like Mr. Hun Sen who should be charged with treason. And we're dying now. Cambodia and Cambodians are dying, are being murdered by 1,000 cuts. Kang Nipong, we are dying. They're killing us with 1,000 cuts through the deforestation, through poverty, through traffic deaths, through lack of opportunities, the lack of education. So it is not unreasonable to compare this regime to the Khmer Rouge regime for those reasons. But let me again zoom out a little bit and look more broadly from the time since the end of the Khmer Rouge. The Khmer Rouge ended, the Khmer Rouge being Cambodian communists, ended when the Vietnamese communists invaded Cambodia and put a stop to the regime. It was an invasion. Of course, it liberated Cambodia. It put an end to the crimes, the massive crimes, which did happen where Cambodians killed Cambodians. This is a fact. We cannot deny this. Cambodians kill Cambodians. When I hear that Cambodians don't kill Cambodians, that is a lie. I see it all the time to this day. Sometimes we allow foreigners to use us to kill other peoples, and other times we just do it on our own. We need to take responsibility for this. But during that time, Vietnam invaded Cambodia on Christmas Day, 1978. It took control of Phnom Penh on January 7, 1979. That is why we use January 7 as the end of the Khmer Rouge regime. But the invasion occurred in December 1978. And it was an easy invasion because already the Khmer Rouge were already so weak they had killed themselves. They were killing themselves prior to this, and by the time that Vietnam invaded Cambodia, it was an easy sweep across the country. Plus, during that time, Vietnam had the third largest military in the world. It had the third largest military in the world, and it had all these military commanders who were hardcore, who had just defeated the United States and were on a confidence high. They are world-class military commanders. When we talk about the K5, the bamboo wall, that is a farce. It was not a genuine military defense during occupation. It was a pretext to recruit Cambodian men to their deaths. That is K5. That is legal genocide. Not just genocide in terms of the killings, massive killings of people. It was intentional. It was to decimate, to kill off the Cambodian race through the killing of Cambodian men. That is legal genocide. The intention was there, and the focus, the target on killing the Cambodian race was there by the Vietnamese military. So the bamboo wall was a pretext to recruit Cambodian men between the age of 18 and 54, some younger and older, and also a few women, but there were young men and boys during that time period who still recount to me, tell me about their time, how in the evening they had to go and hide because they fear of the forced recruitment for them to go to the Western Zone, the almost 800 kilometers of shared border of Cambodia and Thailand, where the Vietnamese military, the overlords during the occupation, wanted to send them. And the dangers were multiple. There was malaria. There was landmines. The Khmer Rouge was still fighting, and they were taken away, forced conscription under gunpoint. And it doesn't matter if you're sick, you're old, the idea is to kill off under the pretext of military defense. So why do I say that it's a pretext? Because to build a wall of bamboo, it's not by hardcore world-class Vietnamese military commanders. These commanders know what they're doing. They know what is real defense. They were the third largest military in the world. To build a wall out of bamboo is not a genuine defensive action. It was a pretext to recruit Cambodian men to their deaths. And it started prior to 1985, Linda. You mentioned 1985. 1985 was the hardcore, was the apex of the deaths. It occurred prior to that. It occurred, the idea came about by the Vietnamese military commanders during when Phan Sovan was prime minister, because he was approached by Le Duc Tho, the military commander, and he was on several points during the Vietnamization of Cambodia. Phan Sovan was approached by Le Duc Tho to build this wall, and he said no. And Chann, who was the defense minister, was killed because he refused to continue building the K5 wall, the bamboo wall, because he knew it was a way to kill off the Cambodian race by the military occupiers. And that's why he was replaced by Hun Sen in January 1985. And that's when it exploded. The numbers exploded. And that's why we tend to think that it started in 1985. No, it started earlier. The plan was conceived as early as in the time of Bayan Savan. But of course, during that time period, we have pieces of information. So these are what Bayan Savan is saying. There's a book. Oh, I forgot to mention the book by Bayan Savan. It's not well written, but it has really important, solid information on K5 plan, on his time during the occupation years. So it's valuable for his pieces of information that only he could tell in that regard. So that's the K5 plan, but there were other policies to kill off the Cambodian race by the Vietnamese military occupiers in the shadow of this secret regime. Remember, the Khmer Rouge was communist. The Vietnamese occupiers, military, was communist. It was changing regime only by changing the driver. It was still communistic. There were still genocides occurring under a different face, under a different leadership. It was still incredibly dangerous and vicious, and the atrocities perpetrated against the Cambodian people occurred. Let me remind you of another genocide, legal, that can be argued that was legal genocide. As I mentioned, Vietnam invaded Cambodia on Christmas Day, December 25, 1978. It took over Phnom Penh and had control over Phnom Penh on January 7, that is why we use January 7, 1979. Throughout 1979, January 1979, February 1979, March 1979, all the way through, there was a famine. And people were dying. So we had a survivor. We had a surviving population of 5 million. Almost 1 million died in 1 year in 1979 under military occupation because the Vietnamese military overlords refused the foreign aid that was coming into Cambodia. It refused, and it created an outcry among the international community. So there was a rock concert by Paul McCartney that was to raise money for the people of Cambodia. There was a lot of international pressure on the Vietnamese military regime to open the borders so that the dying population of Cambodia could receive food, because there was a famine immediately after the genocide. And that is why there was a rush to escape Cambodia in 1979. My family and I went to the border of Thailand and escaped Cambodia to survive. One, because of the communist regime and the atrocities conducted by the military, by the Vietnamese military, and two, because of this famine that was an immediate genocide. William Shawcross has written about this. Nayan Chanda has written about this. I'm not making, and this is not my opinion. These are trusted information, and I'm saying it publicly. If they want to sue me, because I will challenge. I want it to go to a larger public sphere in order to cast light on this very, very dark period. So imagine, when Cambodia survived the Khmer Rouge, we had about 5 million Cambodians. The women couldn't even menstruate, couldn't even give birth because they were so gaunt and so emaciated. But now we have 16 million. The question mark there is, who are these Cambodians? At one point, we have to accept them as Cambodians because after a while, I mean, that's international law and we need to build a new country. But I'm raising these issues because when the Khmer Rouge era and Vietnam invaded Cambodia, we had 5 surviving Cambodians. The women were, and everyone was emaciated, and the Cambodian women were so thin and emaciated and gaunt that they couldn't even give birth and couldn't even menstruate, for example. And then immediately the year after, 79, all of 1979, there was a famine that killed 700,000 Cambodians. So 5 million minus 700,000 Cambodians. And this figure is from the CIA, the American Central Intelligence Agency. So that puts the population close at 4 million in 1979. And then another 500 to 1 million escaped to Thailand and then went off to France, the United States, to Australia. That puts the population at about 3.5 million in 1979. And then the K5 plan, which immediately started in 1980, 81, slowly, the concept was already in play. And then when Hun Sen came and took power in January 1985, it exploded and it was more than 20,000. We're talking about 100,000, but who knows the figures because it was a sealed off country and the numbers will never be known, but we can piece together these numbers. So the surviving members of the Cambodian population was around 3 million to 3.5 million around that time period. And there was a influx of Vietnamese citizens, the discards of their society and the military. So there were two main types of Vietnamese immigrants that were coming to Cambodia as a matter of policy. The soldiers, for sure, and they range at 200,000 Vietnamese soldiers, and the Vietnamese people, and they tend to be the criminal elements and the poor, the discarded, the homeless, the street vendors, the ពួកអញញ៉ៃញ៉ៃនៅក្នុងសង្គមគេដូចបោះយកប្រទេសយើងដូចសម្រាកន្លែងសម្រាមមកបោះសម្រាមនៅក្នុងប្រទេសយើងឲ្យយើងមានភាពអញញ៉ៃញ៉ៃ So, and they use Cambodia as a trash bin for all their discarded population to create chaos in this already extremely vulnerable and fragile society. That is the social context. That is the political context of when immediately after the Khmer Rouge, which no one hardly ever talk about because there are limited information. I can go on, but these books are my sources. Go and read them for yourselves because the details are there. Dr. Tu and I are giving you sort of bits and pieces, but to have a clear information where you take time to consider, to weigh, to think through, read, and start with these books. These are the top books. When you finish these books, go to the other books. But these are the books, start them. They're really, really not informative. And they're, again, unfortunately, they're mainly in English. But start, you have to start somewhere.
Thank you, Naming. Look, Poo, can you unmute your microphone?
Yeah.
Thank you so much for today. We are at 1 hour and 51 minutes already. I'm not sure how long this live stream gonna let me. I think it's probably less than 2 hours, but I'm not sure. But this information is really good source of information, and Samady and I is really fortunate to have both of you here today. I'm always tell the youth, you know, politics is they need to concern about the country. They need to concern about politics because that's what affecting them. And what we talk about today since 1930 until now, and that's all of these are politics. If I want you to have a last comment to the youth in Cambodia, especially inside Cambodia, why should they care about politics? Look, Poo, can you please help to summarize a little bit on that?
You know, Theary put it so well. Cambodia is dying. Cambodians are dying. And what I'm saying that not because what Theary said, because what I went through. And then exactly in 1979, you know, men was almost decimated, destroyed, killed. It was statistically it was so low that they assume that one boy, teenager, can marry 8 women to regenerate the country, how low it is. Imagine few years later, you send 2 million young men to die. If that's not genocide, I don't know what it is. So, you put it so well. It is time for us to look and try to understand. Okay, 7 January, yes, Vietnam came to Cambodia and they saved some Cambodian, yes, but they have their own agenda. They come to invade Cambodia and to control our country. It is time to wake up. And Thierry, you express so well, and you remind me of whatever that I went through, that what happens, and I was there. So I'm glad, she is definitely outspoken, quite knowledgeable, and it is my honor to join today.
It's our honor, and thank you for being here today. Chen's Miss, I mean, Terry's not speaking. Her internet is going out again. Usually, I think that's her, her power is for her to talk. Samady, before we end, I'm not sure if we can. I want Miss, I mean, Terry to say a last few words, but before she come back, can you help to send? This is a lot of information today. What do you get from it, and what do you learn from it? Can you share with our audience, Samady? Unmute yourself.
Okay, so I just want to add comment because I mean, Terry said the translator of one of the book under the Hun Sen regime changed the topic from why Vietnam invaded Cambodia to why Vietnam liberated Cambodia. Do you think the regime is trying to destroy Khmer youth by denying and obliterating Khmer people's own understanding of their history?
Absolutely, no question. Yeah, you know that Terry already said it's the super lord. Okay, Vietnam is the super lord. And the Cambodian government, especially Hun Sen, will do anything to honor Vietnam. He's a puppet. Look around in Cambodia, the monument, that they built. Okay, for what? To remind Cambodia of Vietnam that saved Cambodia. For us who are older, we understand, why they came to Cambodia. Not just for politics, but something else. One thing that we didn't mention, and you should understand that before Vietnam attacked Cambodia, a lot of Khmer, this is another genocide too that people might not know. When the Khmer went to Taining, they killed a lot of Vietnamese, and actually all those were not Vietnamese, they were Khmer Krom. So, basically they killed Cambodians. But Vietnam used that as a pretext to invade Cambodia. Again, this have been planned, everything, when you look back. And of course, Hun Sen will use anything to cover up. And people should understand why they do this. Nowadays, I mean, you can find resources, you can find books, you can find all information. It's time to understand, not just to listen what Hun Sen said. One thing that very interesting that I read Hun Sen's book too. He said that he talked he fled to Vietnam in order to to save Cambodia or something like that. It was a lie. He fled to Vietnam because when they attacked Taining, Vietnam attacked back and they lost. So Hun Sen fled to Vietnam in 1977, even before the purge of his eastern zone, South Pim. So so there's so many things about this man that we cannot trust.
Thank you, Lupu. Welcome back, Namin.
Thank you. So sorry. We're at the close, aren't we?
I want you to speak so your internet is stay on.
The question or the comment was, what are some of my last thoughts, or why we should consider politics, or think about politics? Well, Even if you don't worry about politics, politics will worry about you. Politics will go on and will impact your life, even though you say, well, it has nothing to do with me, and you close your eyes like an ostrich and put your head in its sand, pretending that nothing is out there. For example, COVID and the lockdown. Even if you don't care about politics, what is politics? Politics is relationships, it's interaction between the citizen and the state. There are policies that impact our lives on a regular basis. So even if you said, don't worry about politics, let the politicians worry about it or let others do it. Well, you can say that, but it doesn't take away the impact on you. And if you want to be a victim and let everything just cast on you and just take it, then that's your choice. But if you want to be an agent and you want to shape your life and you want your children to fulfill their full potential, then you fight for those systems that allow for that to happen. And that is a democracy where people don't shut your mouth, where people don't prohibit you from traveling, where you can offer an opinion and participate in civic life. That is what democracy is all about. There are different forms of democracy. There's the open democracy where everyone always has a vote. That's not workable. In a representative democracy where we have elected leaders, that's why we have an election. They respond to the desires of their constituents. That is a representative democracy. That is the system that we have and we want in real terms. We've been talking about communism and the destruction reaped by communism. Communism destroys. It talks about equality, but it wants to pull everyone to the bottom of the sea and be equally dead or barely living. Whereas we want everyone to be equal before the law, not equal in wearing all black. That's stupid. The equality is equality before the law, which is equal opportunities, not equal wearing of clothes, not equal pay, not equal superficial appearance, where a man looks like a boy, a girl looks, no. A man is still a man, a woman is a woman. The equality is the freedom to pursue opportunities, and the law should protect that freedom equally. That is equality before the law. That is democracy. We have differing opinions, which makes life flavorful. It gives colors to life. We don't want the darkness. We don't want to be in black, in mourning all the time, where everyone is equal at the lowest common denominator. That's stupid communism. We have gone through it. We have seen it. We have lived and read about it in other countries and the destruction of communism. We want equality before the law, which is democracy and freedom.
Thank you, Namin, and
so even if you
much.
don't worry about politics, politics will worry about you. So start worrying about politics and
take, for example, the lockdown right now, the red zone right now, where people are not allowed to go anywhere. That's a decision by a leader that want to control their people. And if you don't care about politics, just look at yourself right now in Cambodia. What can you do and what can you not do? You basically cannot do anything right now. If they tell you not to go into Phnom Penh, that's the only thing, because they will close Phnom Penh, and you don't have any say on what you should do and what you should not do. I think Miss Theary gonna come back. I want to say goodbye, but I'm not sure if she can be back on time or not. Look, Poo, you have anything to say? Anything? Your last word?
No, Theary has said it all. She's very eloquent, and what she said was make simple sense. We just open our heart and listen. So Theary said all the right word. Time to wake up and listen.
Thank you so much, Ms. Namin Theary, and thank you so much, Look Poo, for 2 hours and almost 3 minutes of it. That's the longest English show we have in our show on Tuesday. So thank you so much for today, and we got to do this again so that way we remind the new generation, the kid right now, the 20, 30 something, to know the history that affect them, the history of who is Hun Sen, why is Khmer Rouge Part 2 still continue today, and it does not start on April 17, 1975. It started way before that. So I am so grateful, Samady and I are really grateful that both of you here to explain, to discuss on this since 1930 until now, and I'm grateful for that. Thank you so much.
Okay, good, yeah.
Thank you, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Teddy, take care.